I got nothing for the intro, so I thought I'd just be like, shoot my webbing. I don't actually have. It'd be really sweet if I had web shooters. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for a while. He's really living it up, and I really love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Him as Spider-Man / Peter Parker is the quintessential Spider-Man for the big screen. I'll defend that till I die. Just in his attitude and persona, you can tell Andrew Garfield is not 19 years old in this movie. You're watching it, you're like, I feel like you're like 30, dude. But just in his attitude and his shit talk, he's very Spider-Man. I love seeing that. So now Jamie Foxx becomes Electro, and in the trailers we were like, we're gonna get like 3 villains in this movie. There technically are, but there are not 3 villains in this movie, really. I mean, you see it on the banner, 3 villains, and I'm like, oh, this movie is gonna be crowded as shit. And it kind of is, but it's not really because of the villains. Rhino's in it, kind of, not really. He's this dude he takes down in about 2.5 minutes. Having Rhino on the banners is kind of like having those dudes at the beginning of the original Tim Burton Batman. You know, the guy's like, hey man, Johnny Gobbs got ripped and took a walk off a roof, alright? No big loss. Having Rhino on the banners for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is like having those guys on the banner for Batman. It just doesn't make sense, so yeah, slash that. Now we're down to 2 villains. Electro, yeah, he's the main villain. The other one isn't in it much, so really it's like 1.5 villains in the movie. Electro was really cool. Jamie Foxx was good as Electro. I love the way Electro looks. His skin's all see-through and blue and electrical. I was looking at him, I was like, I feel like I can see through your skin. That's awesome. I love things that just look unique and original and interesting, and that was very cool. Speaking of things that look cool, this movie looks really cool. Spider-Man's doing his Spider-Man-ish stuff. That's my favorite part of the movie, is when you're watching, he's just doing the Spider-Man-ish stuff, swinging around. Even when he's free falling, he's dropping from God knows how he got that high. His suit's rippling like he's really doing a free fall. But ultimately, it is a movie about Peter Parker more than Spider-Man. And that didn't necessarily bother me in this movie, but there were moments where I was like, this movie's dragging on. When I first heard this movie's gonna have 3 villains, I was like, it better be long enough. And I found out this movie's 2 hours, 20 minutes long. I was like, okay, it's long enough for 3 villains, I guess. Still gonna feel crowded, but it's long enough. But there are not 3 villains that share equal time in the movie. It really is one central villain, and that's 2 hours and 20 minutes of that, which could work, but this movie just didn't work as well as I wanted it to work for that. Most of the movie revolves around Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy's will they, won't they, are they not? The love thing that they have going on, which is fine, I imagine. It's Spider-Man. He's gonna have a complicated love life. But I feel like that could have been condensed. Like, example, at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man, it ends off, he's like, Gwen, I can't date you. And then it ends with him hinting that they could maybe. And then at the beginning of this movie, they're dating again. And then he breaks it off. And then it's just this back and forth thing. I feel like you could have had him break it off at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 1. And then when he's struggling with it halfway through this movie, have him date her again, and then have that be that. This on again, off again thing just really, I was like, do it or do not do it. Love complication is fine in movies, but it gets old fast. There are a couple very touching moments where you're like, okay, I guess that's why people date. And it feeds into the overall thing. I'm just saying it went on for too long. He and Harry Osborn have their friendship, and it starts getting a bit complicated, and there's friction there, and you're like, I see where this is going. And then there's Electro he has to deal with, and then his love life he has to deal with, and then that thing with his parents he has to deal with. You know that thing where it's like, ooh, your parents have a secret that they cut most of it out of The Amazing Spider-Man 1? Well, they touch on it in this movie, and then they resolve it, and ultimately I was like, his parents in the comic book do have a story arc to them. It's not the same as they did in this movie, but they do have a story. But they resolve it in this movie, and by the end you're like, okay, so the whole thing with his parents was to learn one thing. One thing that we already knew from the last movie. Oscorp bad. Alright, so there are a couple other things that you learn also. But all in all, so Peter Parker can find resolution with his parents not being there. I just don't know why that had to be in the movie. It's just another storyline that this movie has to have in it, and that's what makes it feel crowded. It's not the villains. It's all the shit he has to do. I mean, just focus the movie up. By the end of this movie, there is another villain. I'm gonna use a comparison you don't want to hear me use, but I'm going to use it because it's the best comparison there is. And I swear to you, Venom in Spider-Man 3 had more screen time than the villain at the end of this movie had. And they shoehorned him in here to set up for the Sinister Six thing that they want to do with the other movies. I get that. I'm just saying that was the straw right there. I was like, all right, this movie's basically set up for the next movie. I know it feels like I'm really bitching about this movie, but these are the things I need to address. I will say this movie has really deep contrast. What I mean by that is for every scene that I loved, and I will use the term loved, there are scenes that I loved in this movie. I'm watching, I'm like, I love that. That is great. That's emotional. They're killing it. There's another scene or thing or execution or concept that I hated. I was like, that's sloppy, that's stupid. Why did they do it that way? In the end, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is fun. It's a fun movie. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. I wanted this to be like movie of the year. I wanted this to be the quintessential Spider-Man experience. Andrew Garfield's great as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. Gwen Stacy's great. They're great together. Dane DeHaan is great as Harry Osborn. There is a part near the end of this movie. It is my favorite part of the movie. It's like one of those things that makes the movie for me. The movie was exciting. It looked great. All the cool Spider-Man-ish things you're gonna like. The cool Spider-Man-ish things. I will say The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a good time, no alcohol required. I'll do a spoiler video where I touch more on the things I liked and did not like. I can't do that yet, but time in time. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2, have you seen it? What did you think about it? And did you like it more than The Amazing Spider-Man 1, or did you like 1 more than 2? Whatever you think, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.